Michael, thank you very much, and good morning and welcome. I'm obviously the warm-up act here this morning. I'm going to talk for a bit and about 15 minutes, and then open it up for questions for about 10 minutes. Travelex, I founded in December 1976. I was 24. Last year, Travelex's revenues were about 740 million. We had an EBITDA of 131 million, with the world's largest, all sorts of things, but certainly the world's largest retailer of foreign currency. And about 6 years ago now, I did a deal with Apex, the private equity company, and sold them a controlling stake in the business, which valued the business at $1.055 billion. As I said, I started this in December 76. Can I produce for you the 34-year business plan that will show you from bottom left to top right how all this was going to happen? And of course, in the real world of building businesses, that's not how it happened. In fact, when I started the business, there was exchange control. Some of you may remember, Brits were only allowed to take out 50 pounds of foreign currency at a time. They were little white sticky form at the back of your passports. I decided to open up this little bureau de change in London. We were only allowed to buy currency, not to sell it. We had to go to the Bank of England for permission for each individual location. There was already talk of a common European currency. Tax rates were about 83%, if I remember, or in some circumstances even larger. And as I sort of joked with Julie a couple of months ago when we were at dinner together, if you thought too hard about it, you would never have done it. But for me, the really important thing was to start my own business. And I didn't really think too much about it, and there was no detailed business case and business plan and all that stuff. And it really was a case of sort of ready, fire, aim. I took a little shop in Southampton Road, just near the British Museum. I didn't have any money. I borrowed £25,000. I was 24. My wife and I were already married a couple of years. Our eldest daughter was already born. And took this little shop, and for the first 3 months, 7 days a week, 12 hours a day, all there was me. And I used to have to shut the shop to go to the toilet in the hotel next door because there was no loo in the shop. And my first customer came in to change 300 French francs, if you remember what they were, and you never know, you might see them back again. Stranger things have happened, right? But at least people are talking about it now. I used to say that as a joke, but actually, it's not such a joke anymore. This was at a time when this business I was getting into was dominated by some of the world's largest and oldest banks and financial organizations, at a time when certainly the banks felt they had to be the supermarkets of financial services and provide every service, however big or small themselves. Why did we exist? Well, how did we come to do this? As I said, I can't produce for you the 34-year business plan, but over time, the business grew, and one of the formative things that happened was in 1979, when Margaret Thatcher came into power. One of the first things she did was to actually abolish exchange control. And increasingly over time, the things that we were looking to do as a business were increasingly non-core activities for the major banks, who were themselves under significant cost and performance pressures. Over time, the business grew up through seaports and ferries. And then many of you, I hope, will know the fact that we operate in a large number of airports around the world. In fact, we're the world's largest by a long way. Something like 43% of the world's airline passengers go through the terminals that we often exclusively operate in. But it wasn't until 1985 that I battled with the then unprivatized British Airports Authority to be given an opportunity we were looking to bid for, to participate in the tender for the then brand new Terminal 4 at Heathrow. And that was going to be, if we got through, our first ever airport contract. Well, I had to fight to battle to reverse 2 refusals just to be allowed into the tender because we weren't a global bank, we weren't a high street domestic anything. And on the 3rd occasion, the 3rd attempt, and this was just at the time when the British Airports Authority was getting into the whole retailing thing that we now see as such commonplace activity. I was arguing with this lady, and in the end, and as I tell this story, I say that the fairy godmother of aspiring business builders shone down that day to put the other person in the right frame of mind, and she allowed me to go into the tender. It was a long shot. Nobody really thought it would happen. We went to, I needed I felt not only financial backing, but also credibility support. So I decided that we would go to in those days we called them merchant banks rather than investment banks, and one of the old merchant banks of the day, which was Hambros Bank, who, half humoring me, agreed to back me if we were successful and wrote the necessary letters of support, as well as being prepared to finance commercially. And sometimes long shots come in, and we won. Very controversial. It was the first time that the BAA had ever, at any of their airports, let alone their brand new Heathrow terminal, at the busiest international airport in the world, ever appointed anyone other than a clearing bank. Today, you don't see any clearing banks operating in any of the airports around this country, and around the world, that's how it's gone. It was, I mean, there's lots of war stories to tell you, but time doesn't allow me, but these were exciting and pioneering times. The business grew from there to many airports. I then started the business in America, started the business in Australia off the back of a crazy idea I had to put currency exchange units in domestic airport terminals. Today, Australia is our 3rd largest operation in the world. The US is the 2nd. And gradually, we expanded internationally. I then broadened the business to go into payments because I didn't want it to be dependent just on the travel business. And our fiercest competitor increasingly became Thomas Cook. And we sort of beat up on each other around the world, and they were long established and had sort of ruled the world for many years, and we were the young upstart challenger brand. And then famously, to cut a long story short, in 2000, Thomas Cook was put up for sale. And not only was it put up for sale, but they actually decided to run an auction and split the travel business away from the financial services business and sell them separately. And I approached JP Morgan, who were running the auction, to be asked for the information memorandum, to be informed that Travelex had been specifically barred and excluded from being allowed to participate in the auction because the Thomas Cook management didn't think we were serious about doing it. All they thought we wanted to do was to get the information memorandum. We would never have the money, we'd be able to raise the money and then just use the information against them in a competitive sense. And as somebody said to me at the time, you know, if you don't kick the door down and get in the ring, this lifetime opportunity will pass you by. And through a sort of quirky, and there are many times this has happened, certainly for me, there were 3 shareholders of Thomas Cook, and the pivotal shareholder was an American company called Carlson in Minneapolis. And this shareholding they had, although it was the smallest of the 3, they had options on the other 2 shareholdings, was held in their leisure travel division. And the guy who headed up the leisure travel division of all the bars in all the world, living and working in Minneapolis, was a Brit. And not only was he a Brit, but he was a terrific guy and was a very famous and very successful marketing director of British Airways, a lovely guy called Mike Batt, who knew me. And he said to the guys, look, you know, we're running an auction here, the more the merrier. He knows Lloyd, he's seen how the business has grown, at least give him a hearing. And we got given a hearing, and eventually we were allowed into the auction. And we got through the first round, got through the second round, and we eventually won in a contract race with a large American financial services business at 4:15 in the morning, because, you know, in the corporate lawyer's handbook it says that thou shalt not do deals during daylight hours. After much pizza and Chinese takeaway, we signed the contract to acquire our very much larger competitor for £440 million. We'd never bought a business for £44 million, let alone 440. We didn't have the money. But Barclays Bank, I have to say, were incredibly supportive. They actually lent us the money on a 12-month bridge on the basis that we would take them out no later than 12 months in a traditional debt and equity package. And it was exciting, it was daunting, and yes, I bet the business. But if ever I was going to bet the business, I felt this was something that was, you know, if ever I was going to do it, this was the opportunity to do it on. We went through a sort of 5-month regulatory approval process. We then completed the purchase in March 2001. And we didn't know we could do this at the time we did the deal. But 7 months later, in October 2001, we were able to repay the whole £440 million, and we didn't sell any businesses. So we ended up buying this business for £440 million at an auction, basically for less than nothing. So that was a good deal. That's a good thing. Huge integration challenges. You know, I turned up on the first morning. They came in to find out who their new owner and shareholder was going to be, hoping and praying it wasn't going to be Travelex. And they came in that morning to find out that their worst nightmare had come true. And I had to go down there on that first morning and address the senior management. And yes, we owned their bodies, but the key thing was to try and win their hearts and minds. And I said to them, and I told them, I sort of said it from the heart, really. I said, look, I said a whole bunch of things, but at the end of it, I said, look, I'm not standing in front of you as the newly appointed chief executive who's been given the task of integrating these two businesses. I still own 63% of this business. And what I have done in this transaction is I have bet my efforts and my lifetime's efforts to date on the success of this transaction going forward. So I said, a problem for you is a problem for me. We ain't going to get it all right, but for those of you who want to be part of it, that's fine. And for those of you who don't, I'm very sorry. And it was an amazing deal, a lot of hard work. If I had my time again, I probably would have integrated it a bit harder and a bit faster, but this was new territory for us. So the business grew. It grew geographically. It grew by product mix. We were big in payments. We continued to expand the business geographically. We got into sponsorship because we needed to raise the profile of Travelex to migrate the Thomas Cook operations over to the Travelex brand. That presented all sorts of marketing challenges for the marketeers amongst you. And we stumbled into sponsorship. And it was really, I had a stepbrother who worked for a sports management company who rang me up one day and said, the Australian cricket team are coming to England for the 2001 Ashes and they've got no sponsor. And I mean, I wasn't a cricketing guy. I mean, I could have been in a lift with Shane Warne and I wouldn't have known who he was. So when we started this incredible sponsorship journey, which became very effective, and we ended up doing it. In fact, I think the 3 months of that summer, we ended up doing a deal with the Australian Cricket Board for £250,000 to be the sponsors of the Australian cricket team, and that began a sort of seven-year relationship with them, which became a sort of legendary sponsorship. We then ended up starting our National Theatre sponsorship. For those of you who are theatre goers, the Travelex £10 tickets. Currently, we're in our 9th season. They moved to £12 this year. And we did some other things. We sponsored it's relevant at the moment, we sponsored the TV coverage of the Rugby World Cup in 2003, which was a good thing to do because for the first time in 36 years in any sport, England won a World Cup. So, that was a pretty cool thing to do. And the business grew both from a sort of branding point of view as well as geographically. And as I said, I sort of mentioned the Apex transaction. And really for me, as we approached 2004, 2005, the important thing was that I felt from a personal and a family point of view, I still had one big egg in one big basket. And I felt that really the sensible thing to do was to find a way to take a slice of the egg out of that basket. To cut a long story short, we ended up running a private equity process, and it got down to, from 8 down to finally two participant, of which Apax was one, and in the end I decided to go with Apax, who had brought with them Standard Chartered Bank, and I'd come to know Standard Chartered a couple of years prior to that, and I felt they would be a great addition as a shareholder, particularly because they were big in parts of the world where we wanted to be bigger. And the one little shop with little business had become a business that was valued at $1.055 billion, and I'd had an opportunity to make a few quid along the way. If I think about the sort of recurring themes along that way, I would say to you this, certainly for me, it's about persistence, it's about sticking to what you know and who you know, and by and large you'll stay out of trouble, or should do. Thirdly, it's about, conventional thinking will only ever produce conventional results. If you're going to think the same as everybody else and do the same as everybody else, you'll end up being the same as everybody else, and I think in today's competitive environment it's important to think differently. And fourthly, it's about self-belief. And however many advisors and professionals you have around you, at the end of the day, particularly with those daunting challenges, the opportunity to really move the business in a meaningful way on, it's about digging deep down and having the guts and being brave enough to take that next challenge. I have a favorite quote, which sort of, for me, encapsulates what it is to be an entrepreneur. And an entrepreneur, it's not just about the desire to make money, it's also about ownership, it's about being a free spirit, it's about being in control of your own destiny, it's about being creative, but it's also not a guarantee for success. It's hard, bloody work. But these words, and I'll end off with this quote, really says it for me, and I think says it all. And it's actually from the American President Theodore Roosevelt. And it goes like this. It is not the critic who counts, not the person who points out how the strong man stumbles or where the doer of deeds could have done better. The credit belongs to he who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred with tears and sweat and blood, who errs and comes short again and again, because there is no achievement without error and shortcoming, who, if he succeeds, then knows the triumph of high achievement, and who, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who knew neither victory nor defeat. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much.